virus and almost 399,000 infections. The president also highly critical of the World Health Organization.
They missed the call. They could have called it months earlier. They would have known. And they should have known. And they probably did know. So we'll be looking into that very carefully. And we're going to put a hold on money spent to the WHO.
There are calls for the head of the WHO, Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus, to step down. For the workers on the front lines of the outbreak, a call for hazardous duty pay.
Truck drivers who deliver supplies where they need to go. Grocery store clerks who keep food on the shelves of American pantries. Transit workers who keep the trains and buses running, and many more. They will all be entitled to this premium pay.
Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer says he'll push to have what he calls heroes pay included in the next stimulus plan. The White House also asking Congress for another $250 billion for the payroll protection plan designed to aid small businesses. Singer-songwriter John Prine has died, a two-time Grammy winner and a member of the Songwriters Hall of Fame. He'd been diagnosed with the coronavirus recently. John Prine was 73. No word on the motive yet for a stabbing spree at a Tennessee travel center outside Knoxville on Tuesday. Sheriff's deputy shot and killed a man with a knife after 3 employees were stabbed to death and another was wounded. America is listening to Fox News.
As we stand up to coronavirus by standing back with social distancing, Bank Pacific reminds you that you can come to the bank without going to the bank. Use many of our other delivery platforms like online banking at bankpacific.com, accessing cash at our ATMs, shopping with our debit cards. For businesses, we have secure cash and check drop windows, and we are employing a new smarter mobile app with remote deposit capture in the next few weeks. We're all in this together, and together we will win. Bank Pacific. Brothers but branches, we place roots. Member FDIC.
Guam is home to strong and resolved people. As an island, we regularly deal with the destructive forces of nature together. We at Security Title know that when the storm passes, our families and neighbors will join together to clear the debris, to barbecue whatever is thawing in our freezers, and get back to the business of wholeheartedly living our lives. As our island struggles with the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, let us remember that this too shall pass.
The city where it all started, no longer on lockdown. Travel restrictions have been lifted for the city of Wuhan, China. Most of the 82,000 infections which China claims were reported there. Researchers in Israel say they are getting close to a possible coronavirus vaccine.
Shai Arkin's team at Hebrew University has been targeting the virus with different medicines, hoping to find one that will knock it out.
If you find by chance that one of those drugs is able to inhibit the virus that causes COVID-19, then you're very fortunate, because then the route to enable you to use that drug is incredibly rapid, because all of the toxicity has already been taken care of.
Arkin believes a drug already on the market for other purposes will soon be identified until one can be produced to solely attack the coronavirus. Gary Baumgarten, Fox News.
Acting Secretary of the Navy Thomas Modly is out following a profanity-filled rant to the crew of the USS Theodore Roosevelt after he relieved its captain of his duties for pleading for help when scores of sailors came down with the coronavirus. Modly later apologized, offered his resignation Tuesday, which Defense Secretary Esper accepted. The Justice Department a step closer to resuming federal executions.
A partial victory for the Trump administration Tuesday in its effort to resume executions of federal death row prisoners. Federal inmates were challenging a decision by the Justice Department to restart federal executions after a 16-year break. A 3-judge panel of a federal appeals court overruled a lower court that the DOJ decision violates the Federal Death Penalty Act. But the court sent the case back for a review of additional claims made by the inmates. As a result, it's not clear when federal executions might resume. In Washington, John Decker, Fox News.
And I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Social distancing math. Tossie is infected with COVID-19. She still goes out because she and her friends think it doesn't affect them. Tossie infects 3 friends. Each one infects 3 more. In 30 days, 244 people are infected, including someone's Nana. Most recover, but Nana dies. Reduce your social contact. If you only infect 1 person, in 30 days, the virus spreads to only 4 people. Stay home, stop the spread, save lives.
As a GovGuam designated urgent care center, FHP Urgent Care is here for your urgent medical needs. Go to FHP Urgent Care instead of going to the hospital during this COVID-19 pandemic. FHP Health Center operates Saturdays through Thursdays, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. and is closed on Fridays. FHP's Cancer Center, Adult Medicine, and Pediatrics Department are also open for limited services and availability. FHP Home Health Department is open to care for patients at their homes. Call 646-5825, extension 8174. FHP, our island, your clinic.
Cocoa Coffee Company is now available at Circle K. Single origin coffee beans carefully sourced and locally roasted to give you the freshest cup of coffee Guam has to offer. Grab a cup that's brewed every 30 minutes or purchase a bag of the locally roasted whole beans. Flavors now serving: light medium roasted Ethiopia and medium dark roasted Jamaican Blue Mountain. Exclusively available at Circle K. With every Cocoa Coffee Company purchase, a portion of the proceeds will go towards the Cocoa Recovery Program.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. One of the things that is part of the duties of Tall Tales is to hold the Second Amendment and the other parts of the Bill of Rights in high esteem, remind our international radio listening audience of their importance, alert that international radio listening audience to those who would threaten those constitutional rights, and offer aid and comfort to those who would go out and vigorously defend those rights. After the Second Amendment, we ordinarily go to Zemi Ikatni. So, as usual, the Daily News does not have a locally produced editorial. They do have something from the USA Today editorial board, however. Yeah, what a surprise that is. If it weren't for the USA Today editorial board and Gannett News Service, they'd be running a big blank space on their editorial page every day because they don't seem to have the ability to consistently produce local editorials on that editorial page. So today there is actually a Guam connection. No fault of USA Today or Gannett. It just happened that way. The title is "Commend Captain Crozier, Don't Axe Him." Well, obviously these folks have not been listening to Tall Tales, and they would know that although Crozier played very well to the nickel seats and got a standing ovation from his crew as he left the big stick, that standing ovation, of course, was an example of exactly what sailors shouldn't be doing in this time of the Wuhan virus, but we'll put that aside. So I went through it in some length and held that Crozier, as an officer, should have known that he would pay an extremely high price for what he did, which is what happened. Now, that was not the end of the story. I'm going to come back to the story when we get into the card, but so much for the Daily News editorial. It's not local. It has a local connection, but it's wrong. Okay, then we go to the Post. Borrowing from the retirement fund isn't a good idea. So what other solutions can elected officials provide? In his efforts to find solutions that would help Guam's thousands of displaced and struggling private sector workers who are essentially left to fend for themselves while waiting for the federal Wuhan virus relief funds to come in. And I have to explain, a lot of publications don't use the correct nomenclature. They're using COVID-19. Here on Tall Tales, we're enlightened. When I refer to the virus that is plaguing us all, I call it by its correct name. It's the Wuhan virus. So when I'm reading somebody else's stuff and I come across the phrase or the word COVID-19, I use my editorial prerogative and change it to Wuhan virus, all in the name of correctness. In his efforts to find solutions that would help Guam's thousands of displaced and struggling private sector workers who are essentially left to fend for themselves while waiting for the federal Wuhan virus relief funds to come in, Delegate Michael St. Nicholas proposed borrowing from the GovGuam Retirement Fund. He proposed helping the displaced workers by borrowing approximately $142 million from the $2 billion fund with the assistance of a repayment of 7% interest in 6 months or sooner. The repayment source will come from the federal COVID-19 economic relief money that would eventually flow into Guam. Although St. Nicholas put forward his intention to help, the retirement fund opposes the borrowing idea because it's not a good time to cash out from the fund's assets and investments in light of the financial markets downturn. Now, this is what that means. There's a story in the paper that the fund, the retirement fund's value has decreased by $400 million. Anyone who is following along here knows that since the country basically went on lockdown, nobody's working, we're not producing much of anything. The stock market took a gigantic dive, and the government is putting out such cheap money that everybody can borrow as much as they want without having to pay much interest. So the stock, as it were, the retirement fund's asset took a $400 million dive. So when let's see, the retirement fund opposes the borrowing idea, it's not a good time to cash out from the fund's assets investments in light of the financial markets downturn. What they're saying is our stuff took a dump, but maybe if we wait a while, it'll come back up, and that'll be the time to sell it. Interesting. And maybe it won't. Maybe now is the perfect time to sell. That's why we pay those folks up at the retirement fund big bucks to take care of these things. And then the article goes on to, or the editorial goes on to say, since the Wuhan virus downturn, the fund's value has shrunk by a staggering $400 million from more than $2 billion before the market slide. That is a lot of money. St. Nicholas, when sought for comment, said the retirement fund's assets include a portfolio of investments in bonds that has more than enough cash, and the $142 million could be borrowed from that at no loss to the fund. He essentially said it's okay to borrow from the fund's bond investments because they're not a moneymaker right now. Well, this is the kind of talk I like to hear from people in public life. Retirement Fund Director Paula Bloss, I think probably if they were going to give trophies for really good public servants out there in the government of Guam, Paula Bloss would be way out in one of the front runners. She's very good at what she does. Retirement Fund Director Paula Bloss sent an April 7 letter to Legislative Speaker Tina Munya Barnes echoing the board chairman's concerns. Now, what is the importance of the board chairman's concerns? The chairman of a board is no different from any other board member except for one thing. He chairs the meetings. He comes in and bangs his gavel and says, "I'm calling the meeting to order." He entertains motions, etc., but the chairman is not a super board member. So if the retirement fund board had taken a position, I'd say that's pretty interesting. But the chairman, not so much. Bloss said the fund currently does not hold $142.8 million in cash. Well, I would certainly hope not. You know, that would be like keeping it under your mattress or keeping it in your piggy bank. Of course not. Funds don't keep that kind of cash on board. With St. Nicholas' proposal, the retirement fund would have to liquidate some of its existing investments in order to be able to loan the funds, Bloss added. I'd have never come to that conclusion in a million years. Wow. Okay, we agree with the fund that now is not the time to, in the retirement fund, board chairman Wilford Leon Guerrero's words, quote, raid the retirement fund's assets. There shouldn't be any good time to borrow from funds that are meant for the pensions of current and future retirees. Cashing out would cause the fund to lose more money than what's being taken in. I don't know if this is Wilford P. Leon Guerrero's analysis, Paula Bloss's, or the reporters. But yesterday when I talked about this, I said in the abstract, it certainly makes some sense because the St. Nicholas proposal would give the retirement fund an asset that would net 7% per year. And if you put the linkages in place, like the governor put the linkages in place when she did her retirement fund payoff, I don't see the risk. I don't see that as a raid of the retirement fund. But the editorial says there shouldn't be any good time to borrow funds that are meant for persons of current and future retirees. Well, you know, when you buy investments, you in effect are lending the money to whatever equity or debt you buy. The retirement fund has been raided before, some gubernatorial administrations ago, to bail out GovGuam payroll. And that raid cost the $1 billion in lost investment. The money taken from the prior raid, Leon Guerrero said, remains unpaid to this day. Well, then why don't you go out and collect it? So while this idea of borrowing from the retirement fund isn't going to work, this doesn't stop Guam's elected officials from continuing to urgently find and act on ways to give the displaced private sector workers an immediate economic lifeline, which was the point, which was my major point yesterday, that I gave St. Nicholas high marks because he's the only public official, the only elected official who apparently is analyzing, thinking, and coming up with ideas. Now, a lot of people took shots at his ideas primarily because we didn't clear it with me. You know, I have a lot of good ideas too, but I don't clear them with anybody before I broadcast them. If you think they're good ideas, maybe you'll act on them. If you don't, you won't. Well, I never heard of that one before. Yeah. Okay. So while the idea of borrowing from the retirement fund isn't going to work, this doesn't stop Guam's elected officials from continuing to urgently find and act on ways to give the displaced private sector workers an immediate economic lifeline. It's not enough to say St. Nicholas ideas will not fly. We ask this of the rest of the elected officials. What's your solution? Exact point I made yesterday. And what have you done to move your idea forward without delay? Well, Tina apparently maybe has an idea, and what has she done to move it forward? Well, she kept an eye on the front lawn of the legislature every day so that when Jim Moylan showed up there with his sign, she saw it. That's what she's done. Okay, good editorial, Daily Post. So the Blue Star goes once again to the Guam Daily Post. All right, so let me see who wants to make a comment on Zemi Ikadni. Ken, do you concur with the award of the Blue Star to the Post?
Yes and no. I agree with the awarding of the Blue Star. I disagree with St. Nicholas because, with the hit the retirement fund took, they're going to be scrambling around just to meet their existing commitments. And liquidating assets at this point in time locks in losses, which will further destroy the assets of the retirement system. And they're going to be because a lot of these companies are backing off on their interest payments and their dividend payments. So the retirement fund will probably have to start liquidating assets just to make retirement payments. So
that happened quite a while ago. We've been doing that for years.
Well, the other weird thing is, remember, we're not having public hearings on bills anymore, right? And in the news today, Regine Biscoe-Lee just introduced a bill to give individual tax filers a $400 deduction or credit. I'm not sure because it's not spelled out and the bill's not put up yet, and $800 for joint filers. She seems to have forgotten that she can't do that because the legislature continually refuses to delink from the U.S. IRS tax code. So she's just doing this for the headline. But the fact they're going to be debating this in the session with no public hearing, it just goes to show why we need to have these public hearings, because either our senators are not smart enough to realize that something like this they need input from the community on, because here we have a government that's going to be hamstrung for revenue right now just to make its grossly inflated payroll obligations, and now she wants to gut it even more. Where's she going to make up the difference from?
Yeah,
and the fact that she can't even do it anyway just shows she's just doing this for the headline. If she's smart enough, she might actually not be smart enough to realize that she can't do it, even though in 2018 there was a whole series of meetings on delinking with the tax commission under Joe St. Augustine. I don't know if she attended or not, but half the legislature attended, and they discussed, the possibility of delinking and why it would be good and why they decided not to in the end.
True enough. Which do you think is more troubling, that she is smart enough to know that it won't go anywhere and she's doing it only for the earned media, or she's not smart enough to know that it won't go anywhere? Which is worse?
Which is worse?
Mm-hmm.
That's a really good one right there. It reminds me of a story I read in the Darwinian Awards. Are you familiar with them?
Yeah.
Okay, a guy was, he lost his love, and he was very despondent, decided to commit suicide. But he was one of these guys that wanted to make sure that he did it right. He didn't want to suffer. So he went to a tree that was on the edge of a cliff overlooking the ocean, put a noose around his neck, and he doused himself with gasoline and carried a 45. As soon as he lit the gasoline, he jumped, and he was going to shoot himself in the head to make sure that he didn't feel the pain from the burn. But when he hit the end of the rope, he missed and shot the rope. and fell into the ocean, where he was rescued by passing fishermen, and then 3 months later he died in a hospital of pneumonia.
Well, mission accomplished, huh?
Eventually, is it worse that she's dumb and doesn't realize she can't do what she's proposing to do, and they're going to debate it on the floor tomorrow, according to the KUN news story, one of the corona relief bills, or she's doing it intentionally just to get the headlines because we're coming up on the election and she's trying to appear at the last minute like she cares about the people of Guam.
Yeah,
so,
she's not in Fiji anymore either. I think that's important, that she let people know she's no longer in Fiji or New York or any of the other places that she's always gallivanting off to.
Yeah. So, this is just, but the fact that here we have an emergency special session called to deal with a financial emergency that's impacting the people of Guam, and it's called allegedly to pass badly needed safety and public health legislation. And now all the senators are sticking all these pork barrel bills on it to get their name in the headline, as we are seeing today.
Yeah, well, it's good that you keep an eye on them, Ken, and keep calling them out when this happens. I think sometimes you're the thin red line here that keeps things on the up and up.
Well, I'm trying. A lot of people are watching this and watching the actions of the senators right now. I have to tell you, so far they're not covering themselves in a lot of glory. I can't think of any glory, come to think of it, that has resulted as a result of the past 2 months of activity or inactivity.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of things they could be working on.
Well, they've certainly had enough time to come up with some really well-drafted bills, haven't they? Well-researched and well-drafted bills.
Well, they've had time. It's just they haven't put the time to good use. Because what have they come up with? A bill that gives the governor superpower to arrest or fine anybody that disobeys an executive order.
I'll get into that in the card. Yeah, what they have done is forfeited their power to enact criminal law to the executive branch. That's not the way the system works.
Well, that's what happens when you have 10 little puppets marching around in lockstep in the legislature, more concerned about the protecting the incumbency than protecting the people.
True enough, Ken. Well, go ahead.
I'll be listening to the rest of the show, and I look forward to when you get to the card.
Okay. Well, keep after him, Ken. Thanks for calling. Okay, and then I've got, is this the James or a James? The James. Okay. Good afternoon, James.
Afternoon, Bob. A comment and a question. First, a comment. With regard to Captain Crozier being relieved of his duty, I think that there's a lot of hubbub going along with this that people really honestly are not understanding. Oh, and it goes back to that common sense thing. As a former officer myself, Captain Crozier is guilty of a number of things, and if he's just relieved from his command and he's given a general discharge, he should consider himself lucky because he has violated the Uniform Code of Military Justice, and he has given away vital and sensitive operational information to foreign countries, in fact, everybody in the world. He may as well have just got on the phone and had a conference call with Xi Jinping and President Putin and said, hey, we're going off station and we're not going to be out here. And if anybody would like to pull something and you want to try to make a move on Taiwan, go right ahead because we're bugging out. He has released information to the general public about sensitive, secure, military operational information that should never go outside of the chain of command. If every member of the command of his command on board that vessel was sick and dying, it should not have gone outside of the chain of command. Okay, that's my rant and the comment.
Yeah, well, I'm with you on that, James. And I went through the same thought process myself. Grozier was not a hero. He was properly relieved. Now I read that he's going to be sent to another assignment in San Diego. So they're not going to kick him out of the Navy. They're just relieving him of his command. But of course, anybody that was the commander of a carrier had to have the idea that he had a shot at making admiral. But he's not going to make anything now. He'd be lucky to hang on to.
Yeah, who knows? He may have an axe to grind. He may have already been passed over. He may not like President Trump. Who knows? But that's all secondary, and that's all nothing to do with tipping your operational area of command. He gave away his AO, and he gave away the fact that one of the largest, most powerful, most heavily armed and defended parts of our United States military was going offline for whatever reason.
Exactly.
And that's unacceptable. That's unacceptable. Like I said, he may as well have just had a conference call with everybody and said, hey, if y'all want to try to pull something, now's your time. And, yeah, we're bugging out of here. I'm sorry. Like I said, if he's allowed to remain in the Navy, he's a lucky man because he should be brought up on charges and he should be court-martialed. Now, that's not my idea of a hero. But
okay, there you go. Thanks a lot, James. I think you're right on point. Okay, that was the James. Okay, so is it time for the next break, Real Joe Cruz? Let's take a break.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Everyone has a busy schedule these days, and sometimes we forget to schedule our routine dental checkup and cleaning. Don't neglect your dental health. Schedule one today with Dr. Robert Yang and his Smile Team, conveniently located at the East West Business Center on Marine Drive, Upper Tumon. Call us today at 647-8702 or 3. Again, that's 647-8702 or 647-8703. We make smiles happen.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Horizon Properties. Call 646-7616 or 777-7792. You can also visit them at horizonpropertiesguam.com.
Welcome back to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, Guam's single voice of reason. Call now, 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
So here we are, back again to the card. And before I start in the card, I noticed Brad Hewitt is signed in from San Antonio. It's always good to have you on board, Brad, but I have to issue a corrective instruction here before I proceed further. Brad said, that's the virus. The disease is COVID-19. Now, Brad's a long ways away, and he doesn't get to listen to Tall Tales every day, so, he may be a little out of touch. But, Brad, it's the Wuhan virus. The causative agent is the Wuhan virus. The disease is the Wuhan virus. If you see it in print, if you see COVID-19 in print and you want to read it, it reads like this, Wuhan virus.
Yeah, shout out to Wuhan. You guys are doing great.
There you go. Yeah, it is the Wuhan virus. Okay, so the card today, this is what I got on the card. I've got social distancing versus the governor's office. I touched on that a little bit before. I've got Secretary of the Acting Secretary of the Navy. Whoa, former Acting Secretary of the Navy. Thomas Mobley versus the chain of command. I've got Lou and Tina versus Michael San Nicolas and Jim Moylan. And then the main event, Tall Tales versus Tina Rose Munya Barnes and Amanda Shelton. And then some holdovers, Helen Middlebrook versus Perceived Wisdom, Andrew and Bill O'Reilly versus Big Government, and Vigilance Committee versus Lou. Whether I get to that far or not, I don't know. Okay, first item on the card, social distancing versus the governor's office. Now, you recall that there was pictures in the media of a poker game, what looked like the uninitiated eye to a poker game in Humatak. Two uniformed officers, Stephanie Flores of the governor's office and somebody else, and one of the uniformed officers was the governor's driver. And when the governor's director of communications was asked, she said, well, yeah, this is really stupid, etc. And then when she was asked, will these people be disciplined, she came back with the old faithful, we don't comment on personnel matters. So my take on that was, do you comment on operational matters? Do you comment on what the governor's policy is when she has people in her, quote, command who deliberately flaunt her executive orders? Is that okay because we don't talk about personal matters? Anyhow, that was what I said yesterday, and then leave it to the poet laureate Andrew to come up with a couple items that I'm going to read into the record today. First one, the staffers thought they were out of sight, but a photo exposed and shone a bright light. It's not a big deal, they said with a squeal. At least we weren't at a cockfight. I suppose you could look at it that way. It was just a poker game. And then the excuse was, well, it wasn't really a poker game. It was a pretend poker game, as though this makes it better. And then the next one, a gambling photo caused chatter. On Adeloop, it did much splatter. Though feathers did ruffle about the kerfuffle, mum's the word on the personnel matter. So, Governor, if you want to have credibility with the folks, that can't be the knee-jerk reaction to everything that happens in your administration. We can't talk about that. It's a personnel matter. Richard Ibanez went from, resigned for health reasons as the director of swimming pools over at Parks and Rec, and turns up a couple of weeks later at the Department of, as you were, Guam Mass Transit. Does that mean that Guam Mass Transit is now going to have a swimming pool division? Or does it mean that Guam Mass Transit has decided that they want all of their blue buses to be green? Is this why they brought Ibanez on board? But if no one so far has asked the governor's director of communications about this, but the answer would be, we don't talk about that. That's a personnel matter. So it's the ideal shield for anything that happens in the administration that the governor should explain, but doesn't want to. And by the way, you'll look long and hard to find that exception to the open government law called personnel matter. And when you do find something that deals with personnel files, you'll find that it's not a bar, it's permissive. It says that government officials don't have to provide it. Nothing there says they can't provide it. So this is a game. This is a shell game. We don't talk about personnel matters. If a reporter would stick his microphone in Janela's face and say, why don't you talk about personnel matters? Are you trying to hide something? That might be Blue Star material right here on Tall Tales. Okay. Moving right along to former Secretary Thomas Mobley versus the chain of command, James pretty well laid out the same analysis that I did when Crozier was relieved, that if someone with his experience had to go in this with his eyes open, had to know that if he were to send that letter out on a broad distribution, there would be a price for him to pay, and he paid the price. Not high enough price for James. James said he not only should be relieved of his command, but should go to before a court-martial for giving up important operational aspects of his ship. Interesting point. So Crozier was relieved. He had a moment there where his tummy must have been very warm, because when he was walking off the ship, a large number of the crewmen were on the hangar deck. They gave him a rousing cheer as he left, etc. So he must have felt good about that. And that would have been the end of it. This would have kind of been sliding under the radar for now. We would have been paying a fair amount of attention to the incidents of Wuhan virus on the ship and things like that. But the Crozier affair would have receded into memory until Acting Secretary of the Navy Thomas Mobley did something incredibly stupid. He got on a plane and flew out here and went straight to the Teddy Roosevelt, got on the horn there and spoke to all of the crewmen in a manner that no senior official should ever speak to enlisted men. One thing, he degraded Crozier, saying he was either naive or too stupid to be the commander of a ship. You just don't do that. Even if it's true, it's not the kind of thing that senior military officials, even in civilian clothes, should ever say. And then he went into some of the details with Crozier. The chain of command works both ways. It flows up, and they're also going down. It's not a wide open channel either. You don't have admirals scolding seamen through the chain of command. There's an enlisted chain of command. There are chief petty officers, etc. So the subject of Mobley's remarks made to all of the enlisted people on that ship were totally inappropriate. And, of course, they were recorded, transcribed, and printed. And first thing he did was he doubled down. He stood behind what he said. And when this came out, I said, Mobley ought to be relieved of his command. That was the ruling from Tall Tales yesterday. The real Joe Cruz banged the gavel, and that was the ruling from Tall Tales that Mobley should be relieved. Well, guess what? He must have gotten wind of Tall Tales when he was out here to do his little rant on the microphone. And my advice to him was, if you want to sit in front of a microphone and rant about what's going on around you, be a talk show host. Give up being a Secretary of the Navy. So apparently Mobley heard my remarks, because yesterday he resigned. So I've said it before, and I'll say it again. The impact of Tall Tales is extreme. It's far-reaching, and it's deep. So apparently when Mobley heard that, he said, wow, if I've lost the trust and confidence of Tall Tales, I better turn in my resignation. So that's probably the last time we'll be talking about Thomas Mobley. Next item on the card is Lou and Tina versus Michael San Nicolas and Jim Moylan. Just briefly on this one. Lou has been cranking out executive orders with carefree abandon, And then she writes to Tina and says, you know, I've got to have some legislative authority to do this, after she cranks out 10 of them. And we don't know if Tina got the letter or not, because Tina hasn't been coming to work. You know, the legislature hasn't been in session for like 3 weeks now. So Lou is cranking out executive orders that she finally figures out are flawed. And Tina has caused the legislature either to be on strike or on extended AWOL. So that's 2 of our elected officials. And then on the other side, Lou and Tina versus Michael San Nicolas and Jim Moylan, we have Michael San Nicolas, who called together Jim Moylan, Mary Camacho, and Tina, probably the closest thing that we had to a legislative session. And he laid out his plan that was criticized. Again, it perhaps is not a perfect plan, but it showed a thought process. It showed someone who was alert to the problems that are going on here. Took his hat off and scratched his head and said to himself, what can I do about this? And he came up with some plans. Now, his only angle on it was, if you do these things, I can grease it for you over on the Washington, D.C. end. But it was really a local matter, which he made clear to Tina during that telephone conference. So Lou is cranking out useless executive orders. Tina's got the legislature on strike, and one elected official, Michael San Nicolas, is at least thinking and getting people to think and discuss and talk about solutions to the problem that we have, because so many people are out of work and are in desperate states. The other person here, Tina and Lou versus Jim Moylan. Jim Moylan has been cranking out letters and bills all along, and finally, Jim Moylan figured out how to get the legislature back in session. On Monday, he posted himself on the yard out in front of the legislature wearing a sign communicating to Tina, we don't have to wait for the federal stuff. Let's go. So I made the remark yesterday that we have finally figured out how to speak to Tina, or how to communicate with Tina. So if you have a message that you want to get to the Speaker of the 35th Guam Legislature, make yourself a cardboard sign. Of course, it's pretty hard to go into a store now and buy some poster board because it's not an essential item. Right, Carl? But figure out some way to make a sign communicating the message that you want Tina to understand, then go down and stand in front of the legislature. Apparently this works better than emails or snail mail or telephone or anything else. So we've got a couple of elected officials here. All the rest of them are doing nothing. You know, the other senators are doing nothing. We've at least got 2 that have their thinking caps on and are doing, at least going through and putting out something that looks like the reason that we wanted them in office in the first place. If we want people who will stay home and not go anywhere and not do anything, we don't have to pay them $55,307 a year. You could probably find people who would do that for $5,000 or $10,000 because it would be so undemanding. So, some of the folks who are talking about part-time legislature have said that what we have now is not an argument for a part-time legislature because we have a no-time legislature. Okay, next item on the card is Tall Tales versus Tina Rose Munya-Barnes and Amanda Shelton. Let me take a short break and I'll come back to that item on the card.
Family Finance has been serving the people of Guam since 1959, and they'll continue to be there for you in the years to come. Whether you're looking to get a personal loan for that summer vacation or paying off those long overdue bills, Family Finance has got you covered. Apply for a personal loan from $1,000 up to $3,600 by calling Family Finance in Agutya at 475-4545, Upper Tumon at 647-5626, or in Dededo, 633-4473. Family Finance, serving the people of Guam since 1959.
If you've ever struggled for breath, you know what a scary experience it is. Whether you have asthma, emphysema, COPD, lung cancer, or another respiratory illness, the right medical treatment makes all the difference. GRMC's Pulmonology Clinic has the latest technology and respiratory equipment, staffed by world-class pulmonologists. Make an appointment today with GRMC's Pulmonology Clinic and start breathing easier. GRMC, where patients are partners.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Security Title, making sure you actually own the property you think you just bought.
Okay, so we got about 9 minutes to that big halftime show that we all like so much. First thing I'm going to do here is I have something that appeared on Candid News. This is a while back, at the kind of at the very beginning. In a video of a recent address by Governor Lou Leon Guerrero to the Guam Medical Association leaked to Candid News, Ms. Leon Guerrero is caught on tape throwing her powers under the Emergency Health Powers Act around and threatening a local clinic with her power to seize its facility and use its personnel however she feels. Quote, "No, you will provide the government and we will work together because I will use your facility, maybe for triaging or maybe for isolation, depending on what case may be. That's my authority if we declare it a public health emergency," Ms. Leon Guerrero explained in response to a question from an American Medical Center worker. Ms. Leon Guerrero has not yet declared a state of public health emergency. Remember, this goes back a few weeks. Under a law enacted by the legislature 20 years ago, the governor has near dictatorial powers during a state of emergency and can seize private assets and conduct the financial affairs of the government as she sees fit. In the event you declare the island in a pandemic emergency, would satellite clinics such as American Medical Center, FHP, or SDA, will the government provide us with extra supplies? Will the government be able to provide supplies such as gowns and gloves or even extra personnel to assist? The worker asked the governor. And then Lou comes back and says, so if we declare a public health emergency, the governor has the authority for everything. The governor started her response. And so I can say to AMC, you are now under government authority, and this is what I want you to do. This is how we're going to do it. If we declare a public health emergency, there is local legislation that allows me. I have authority. I have authority to take money. I have authority to take property. I have authority to move personnel wherever I feel they needed to be. Yeah, so yes, we have to. Basically, you have no say. This is Governor Leon Guerrero talking to the Medical Society. Right. Basically, you have no say. So I think that particular mindset must be kept in mind as we consider what I'm going to be talking about today. And I'm going to be talking about two bills today that that ought to come before the legislature tomorrow. And I'll give you my analysis of them. They are both flawed. I'm going to start out with bill number, I think it's 341, as you were, 334. And this is from Tina Rose Munya Barnes, Jose Pido Terlaje, Amanda L. Shelton, Raging Bisco Lee, Kelly Marsh Taitano, and Joe S. San Augustine. When I talked about this yesterday, I labeled them the Silly Six. All right, so here's their bill. It amends Section 19404, which is one of the key sections in Chapter 19 of Title 10, which is where this Emergency Health Act lies. And this is what it said. What it says, it adds a new subsection B to 19404, and B reads as follows. Any person found to be in violation of an executive order promulgated by a Magahagan Wahan during a declared emergency to health or safety in the exercise of authority under this chapter or 10 GCA 65 shall be guilty of a misdemeanor. Upon conviction, the person shall be fined not more than $5,000 or imprisoned not more than 1 year or both. Okay, so the operative section here says that it's a crime to break an executive order. The punishment is 5 years, $5,000 or a year in prison. Now, here's the next. I hope that I'm not banging this too hard, because this is the reason I call this, folks, the Silly Six. Here's the next section of the bill. If any provision of this act or its application to any person or circumstance is found to be invalid or contrary to law, such invalidity shall not affect other provisions or applications of this act which can be given effect without the invalid provisions or applications, and to this end the provisions of this act are severable. So that means that if a court says that subsection B is unconstitutional, it can be severed, and the rest of the act stands. Well, once you pull section B out, what's left? Nothing, except the severability clause. But they've taken it upon themselves to throw a I suspect if I were to get Tina's recipe for lasagna, if she were to share it with me, one of the items in the recipe would be a severability clause. And then the next section is this. This act shall be effective upon enactment. Well, upon enactment, every bill that passes the legislature is effective at midnight on the day the governor signs it. You don't need to say that in the bill. And the statute also talks in terms of veto overrides and laying before the governor. But to have an effective date section in a bill, unless you want the effective date to be down the road, then it makes sense. If you didn't want this bill to be effective, you wanted to give the people a little chance to adjust to it, and you didn't want it effective right away, you could say this act shall be effective 15 days after enactment. That would make sense. So I get into these easy parts here just to give you some idea of the thought process or lack thereof that went into this bill. Okay, we'll come back to the Silly Six right after the big halftime show.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM, and 104.3 HD3.
Even as deaths increase, so does the optimism. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. Health experts have been warning of a possible surge in coronavirus deaths over the next several days. And New York on Tuesday recorded its one-day high of 761 deaths. But Governor Andrew Cuomo says that's a lagging statistic.
Right now, we're projecting that we are reaching a plateau in the total number of hospitalizations, and you can see the growth, and you see it starting to flatten. Again, this is a projection. It still depends on what we do.
The president says it shows that social distancing efforts are paying off.
President Trump tells Fox's Hannity he can't say yet if that'll be extended.
We're going through April, as you know, April 30th. And we're going to make a decision from there.
But he says he's seen encouraging signs that the pandemic may be easing.
I think we're reaching a level of where it's going to start coming down, where it's going to start sloping down.
However, the World Health Organization has been warning about dropping social distancing too soon, saying it could lead to a fast resurgence of the outbreak.
Fox's Jill Nato worried that warmer weather will entice people to stop socially distancing themselves. New Jersey's Governor Phil Murphy has ordered all state parks to close until further notice. The Centers for Disease Control considering new guidelines for self-isolation to make it easier for those who've been exposed to someone with the virus to return to work if they are asymptomatic, test their temperature twice a day, and wear a face mask. President Trump also telling Fox's Hannity the World Health Organization has made several critical errors during the pandemic.
Where it came from, the extent of it, how serious it was. They never viewed it as that serious.
The president says he's considering cutting funding to the WHO, which he calls too China-centric. Asian stocks closing Wednesday mixed, Dow futures trading lower. America is listening to Fox News.
As we stand up to coronavirus by standing back with social distancing, Bank Pacific reminds you that you can come to the bank without going to the bank. Use many of our other delivery platforms like online banking at bankpacific.com, accessing cash at our ATMs, shopping with our debit cards. For businesses, we have secure cash and check drop windows, and we are employing a new smarter mobile app with remote deposit capture in the next few weeks. We're all in this together, and together we will win. Bank Pacific. Where others put branches, we place roots. Member FDIC.
Guam is home to strong and resolved people. As an island, we regularly deal with the destructive forces of nature together. We at Security Title know that when the storm passes, our families and neighbors will join together to clear the debris, to barbecue whatever is thawing in our freezers, and get back to the business of wholeheartedly living our lives. As our island struggles with the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, let us remember that this too shall pass.
The Trump administration requesting more money for the program to stimulate small businesses through the outbreak.
Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin is asking Congress for an additional $250 billion for the Paycheck Protection Program, intended to help small businesses make payroll and avoid layoffs.
Mitch McConnell is prepared to bring it up on Thursday, and if it passes with unanimous consent, which we would expect it will, it'll go to the House on Friday for the same approval process.
Congress approved nearly $350 billion for the loan program last month as part of a $2.2 trillion economic rescue package. Congressional leaders have already made proposals for additional funding, including a plan from Senate Democrats to provide up to $25,000 in hazard pay for workers on the front line of the coronavirus response. Jared Halpern, Fox News.
Hundreds of thousands of Wisconsin voters braved the epidemic to vote in Tuesday's primary election.
It's bigger than the coronavirus to me. Voting, it's bigger than myself. I had to be out here.
We won't know who the primary winners are until next week while they wait for the absentee ballots to arrive in the mail. A singer's attempt to use the outbreak as the reason to get out of jail has been denied.
R. Kelly will remain behind bars despite his pleas for release due to the coronavirus pandemic. U.S. District Judge Ann Donnelly denied the R&B singer's motion, finding that he remains a flight risk. Kelly is being held at the Chicago Metropolitan Correctional Center awaiting trial on racketeering, child pornography, and other charges. His lawyers say the 53-year-old's recent surgery puts him at a higher risk of contracting COVID-19. In opposition, the government noted that inmates are afforded free soap and have the option to buy more if needed. Michelle Polino, Fox News.
And I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
One of the easiest ways to prevent the spread of COVID-19 is to wash your hands with soap and water for at least 20 seconds. Let this message help you time it. Start soaping up now. The virus can survive in the air for 3 hours, on copper for 4 hours, on cardboard for 24 hours, and on plastic and stainless steel for 72 hours. Disinfect phones and common household surfaces like tables, doorknobs, light switches, countertops, toilets, faucets, and sinks, desks, including computer keyboards and kids' toys. Choice Broadcasting reminds you to stay safe and stay clean. You can rinse now.
GRMC's cardiology department treats most complex heart problems. In our catheterization lab, cardiologists use imaging equipment to treat clogged arteries that can cause heart attacks or heart failure. We perform balloon angioplasty, stenting, and other life-saving cardiac procedures. If you suffer from a heart condition, have your provider refer you to GRMC's cardiology clinic at 645-5500. GRMC, where patients are partners.
Cocoa Coffee Company mugs are now here. Show pride for your island as you enjoy your delicious Circle K coffee. Each generously sized 16-ounce mug is etched with Guam-inspired images like Chief Gadao, Serena, Two Lovers, and many more. The Cocoa Coffee Company mug collection is available for a limited time only, so don't miss out. Get yours today and collect them all. Exclusively available at Circle K locations. A portion of the proceeds go toward the Cocoa Bird Recovery Program.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific. Banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
Another truly great halftime show. And now we're back for the second half of Tall Tales. I was opining on the Silly Sixes Bill 341. And once again, what it says is that anybody who violates one of Governor Leon Guerrero's executive orders can be fined $5,000 and imprisoned for 1 year. So let's consider what that means. Now, Lou has in her executive order an order that stores that sell essential items cannot sell non-essential items. So, for example, if you're a grocery store, as I understand it, you can't sell flashlight batteries because flashlight batteries are not essential items. Tell that to anybody in this digital world whose batteries are dead. But let's take that as an example. So, if this bill became law in its current order, and you were a merchant and you sold a flashlight battery, the plain terms of this bill say a year and $5,000 maybe. So the interesting thing here, it's more than just interesting, it's frightening that the legislature would abrogate its entire responsibility to enact the criminal law to the governor. is if you look anywhere else in the Guam Code annotated for various kinds of criminal laws, they're all enacted by the legislature. You know, the laws against murder and rape and robbery and some of the newer crimes, etc. The only way an item gets to become a crime is if it's introduced as a bill in the legislature. The legislature goes through its usual routine, passes it, it goes to the governor, and the governor signs it. We don't have any laws in the books right now that were the product of the governor. But the Silly Six wants to change that. Instead of enacting criminal laws themselves, they're going to say, whatever the governor thinks is a good criminal law and puts it in an executive order, that becomes the criminal law. This is beyond silly to think that anyone in the legislature would come up with this. Now, they've had so much time on their hands, one would have thought that they could have come up with a more workmanlike bill if they wanted to give, if they wanted to work with the governor. Now, the governor does have a lot of power under Chapter 19 of Title 10, and she does have the ability to enact all kinds of executive orders. But as I explained yesterday, she has come up with a lot of thou shalt nots. And Chapter 19 allows her to come up with the thou shalt nots. But there's nowhere in Chapter 19 is there a provision for or else. Thou shalt not travel in groups or thou shalt not assemble in large crowds. That's the thou shalt not. Because if you do, here's what's going to happen to you. Nothing. There are no punitive provisions at all in Chapter 19 of Title 10. So I'm not going to encourage anybody to go out. Don't try this at home, because I think we should go along with all of the things that Lou has asked us to do, you know, for our own self-preservation, if not for a sense of being law-abiding citizens. But this is just not the way to do it. If the Silly Six wanted to do something, they could do a little research, and they could dig up a case called Gale versus the Governor of Guam. People have been talking about this. This is a case that occurred after Typhoon Pamela. And after Typhoon Pamela, Governor Ricky Berdallo put a curfew in place. First it was, I think it was like 7 p.m. to 6 a.m., and then it went to 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. And a gentleman named Andrew Gale challenged went to the District Court of Guam for an injunction to enjoin the governor from enforcing that curfew. Gale's lawyer was a gentleman named Howard Trapp, who from time to time has been a caller on Tall Tales. He's a lawyer. He's a famous lawyer, and Trapp and Gale were partners. So Gale was the client, Trapp was the lawyer, and Judge Duenas decided that case. And the case was decided by Judge Duenas, Judge Cristobal Duenas, the former district court judge. He said that the inherent police powers of a state rests in its legislature. So it's the statutes on the books that give the governor the power. Well, she has a fair amount of power under 10 GCA Chapter 19. But she doesn't have the express power to do a curfew. And, of course, as I mentioned, she doesn't have the power to punish anyone who doesn't obey with a curfew. So Judge Duenas went on to say this: in the event that the Organic Act or the Government of Guam, Code of Guam, provides the governor with the power to unilaterally promulgate curfew regulations in the aftermath of a natural disaster, such regulations must be reasonable, because such regulations severely limit, as it were, impinge the civil liberties of the populace and curb an individual's freedom. Only a clear showing of emergent necessity can justify their imposition. Freedom of movement is a fundamental right which may be restricted only where necessary to further the most compelling state interest, and such regulations must be narrowly circumscribed in order to withstand a constitutional challenge for overbreadth and vagueness. So these are the touchstones. Guam law gives the okay, so the statute then would have to tack on all of those requirements to the executive orders. The executive orders then, in order to pass constitutional muster, must be reasonable. There must be a clear showing of the emergency necessity, and the regulations must be narrowly subscribed in order to withstand constitutional challenge for overbreadth and vagueness. Well, this statute that Tina did, a lawyer's term, sometimes statutes are challenged on the constitutional basis that they are void for vagueness. In other words, a reasonable man could look at it and not understand what it means. This one is not void for vagueness, it's vague for voidness. So the doctrine of non-delegation means that the legislature can't delegate its power to enact legislation to the executive. Now, there can be delegations, but the delegation has to have some standard as to what the executive orders must comply with, and I just went through that. There has to be, the regulations have to be reasonable. There has to be a clear showing of emergent necessity, and the regulations must be narrowly subscribed. So a statute that says any person found in violation of an executive order promulgated by the governor during a declared emergency shall be guilty of a misdemeanor. So the governor could say, any person walking down the street not wearing a hat is in violation of the statute. The bill here from the Silly Six puts no limitation on it whatsoever. So this is a waste of the legislature's time with all of the serious problems that we have. And Governor, you have a dog in this fight. Are you just going to send a note over to the legislature and say, oh, give me some authority here without paying any attention to what they're doing? One would think that you'd draft your own bill and say, this is what I need, and either have a friendly senator introduce it for you or introduce it yourself under your Organic Act authority. But no, he just said, can you give me some authority here to have a curfew? So we're supposed to have 3 independent branches here. So obviously we don't. We only have one because the governor, apparently the legislature is willing to give the governor its power to enact the criminal law. The legislature only meets when the governor asks it to meet. So why do we even need to have a legislature? Maybe we could do one thick bill that said from now on the governor can enact all the laws and the legislature doesn't have to meet at all. So that's why I call this a silly. And I think I better give credit where credit is due once again. Actually, it's discredit where credit is due. Here are the 6 co-sponsors that comprise the Silly Six for Bill 334. Tina Rose Munya Barnes, Jose Pido Terlahi, Amanda L. Shelton, Raging Bisco Lee, Kelly Marsh, Titano, and Joe S. San Augustine. I guess I ought to explain. Some people are probably wondering, has Bob got a problem with his throat? Has he got a sore throat? Or I hope he's not symptomatic for Wuhan virus.
You know, if you've got a sore throat, then all of us do, because that's everybody's doing that now. Titano.
Really?
That's how I speak of it.
Well, it's good to know what you're talking about, Real Joe Cruz.
Right, sir.
So here's the explanation for some who may not understand what's going on when I refer to Senator Titano. And here it is. There is a senator in the legislature whose name is Kelly Marsh, but then she puts the word parenthesis Titano, close parenthesis, after the Kelly Marsh, even on the bill I'm looking at. So it's too cumbersome to say Kelly Marsh, parenthesis, Titano, close parenthesis, because I spend more time and breath talking about the parentheses than I do about the person's name. So I have, again, given the editorial, my editorial preference here, I have assigned a sound to the parenthesis sign. So here's how a parenthesis sounds. So that way I just make that noise and I don't have to say parenthesis, close parenthesis, etc. That's why I refer to that senator as Senator Kelly Marsh Titano, in case you were wondering why I'm making these strange sounds. So that's the silly six. They put their names on here. They initialed it. They need to be held responsible for this. Okay, now let's move on to another aspect of this bill. Let's say that it's properly drafted. And if Judge Duenas were, may he rest in peace, if he were to gaze at this bill and he would say, yes, this bill passes constitutional muster, what about the rest of it? Now, what happens if you violate the bill? $5,000 fine, 1 year in prison. Does that sound a little bit heavy-handed? You know, you could probably, you know, if my example of going into that store that sells essential items and buying an unessential item, you'd be better off probably holding up the store. Because if you're convicted of armed robbery, the penalty would probably be less than violating Lou's executive order. This makes absolutely no sense at all. Now, I can see the wisdom of a curfew. I can't say I'm crazy about the idea, but a well-constructed curfew designed in the proper fashion, I can understand the wisdom of it. I'm not sure I like it, but I could understand the wisdom of it. But if there's going to be a penalty, it can't be a severe penalty. You know, maybe $100 at the most, or maybe something like a traffic citation, just so that it has some kind of deterrent effect. But $5,000 in a year in prison for staying out too late? Wow. So that's this bill.
You know, sir, if both of us get thrown in the pokey, we could run the show from in there.
Yeah, we could go on location, right?
You can stop us.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I suspect the other detainees would appreciate it.
They would, because nobody's backing them.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, and then there's another bill here. This is Amanda L. Shelton, Talina Cruz Nelson, Tina Rose Munya Barnes, a two-time loser, Jose Pido Terlahi and Joe S. San Augustine, who've doubled down. And this bill says, adds a new section, as you were item 7 and 8, to 10, as you were 10 GCA 19403A, emergency powers. And the bill starts out, during a state of public emergency, the governor may, through an executive order, suspend the provisions of any regulatory statute, et cetera, procedures covering local businesses. We've talked about this quite a bit. This is the section of the law that the governor used to emasculate the open government law, basically make it a dead letter. So it allows her to do 6 things, and then Shelton's bill adds a 7 and 8. 7 says, through an executive order may implement a curfew for all residents. 8, through an executive order, limit all movement other than essential business maintenance of life sustenance, emergent medical needs. Well, once again, I don't know if this bill as drafted passes constitutional muster, because, as I mentioned, what we're looking for here is the regulation, the statute's got to be reasonable, a clear showing of emergent necessity, and the regulations must be narrowly prescribed. So when you say an executive order may implement a curfew for all residents, that could mean that the curfew lasts from midnight to midnight for all residents, every place on the island, compared to a curfew that, say, ran from 7 p.m. to 6 a.m. only in the most crowded villages, as a thought. That would show that some thought had gone into this. Instead of this is only 5 folks here. Instead of the 5 here saying, well, we got to draft a bill, let's grab the broadest brush that we can here to paint this bill. And then through an executive order, limit all movement other than essential business, maintenance of life, etc. Limit all movement. So all movement, that means that apparently when I'm at home every morning, if you're driving through Jigo, you'll see me stumbling around out there in Marine Corps Drive. If I were doing that, I could be violating an order that limits all movement. So then the other thing here is that I don't think that section's even necessary, because there are already provisions in Chapter 19 of Title 10. As an example, 19502, the Public Health Authority may exercise for such periods as the state of public emergency exists the following powers concerning facilities, materials, roads, or public areas. To control or limit egress and ingress to and from any stricken or threatened public area, the movement of persons within the area, and the occupancy of premises therein, if such action is reasonable and necessary to respond to the public health emergency. Now, that's how a statute is drafted, guys. 10 GCA 19502 D2, which probably already gives the authority for a curfew. And then we also have 10 GCA 19601. During a state of public health emergency, the public health authority shall use every available means to prevent the transmission of infectious disease and to ensure that all cases of contagious disease are subject to proper control and treatment. Every available means. So Shelton's bill doesn't have any punitive provisions. So if the governor used this to create the curfew legislation, It's another one of those where there's a thou shalt not, but there's no or else. There would be no penalty for violating the curfew regulation. And the same with the limitation on movement. So, senators, when you're in the legislature, people expect you to know what you're doing. And I've mentioned this a lot of times before. The way you communicate with your constituents is with the bills that you introduce, not the 50 resolutions that you introduce and present every month, not all of the letters that you write, not even your calls to talk show hosts. It's the bills that you introduce. And your constituents expect that when you introduce bills, you will not only do the right thing, but that you will also do things right. And these are two examples of, even if you think they're the right thing, they're certainly not doing things right. Okay, let's break here for the seventh inning stretch.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Family Finance has been serving the people of Guam since 1959, and they'll continue to be there for you in the years to come. Whether you're looking to get a personal loan for that summer vacation or paying off those long overdue bills, Family Finance has got you covered. Apply for a personal loan from $1,000 up to $3,600 by calling Family Finance in Agutya at 475-4545, Upper Tumon at 647-5626, or in Dededo, 633-4473. Family Finance, serving the people of Guam since 1959.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Horizon Properties. Call them at 646-7616 or 777-7792. You can also visit them at horizonpropertiesguam.com.
Okay, here we are, Wrigley Field, Chicago. Nobody in the grandstand, nobody out on the field, nobody on Maitland Avenue running down the first base side of the field. Everything is deserted in Chicago, but Tall Tales triumphs. And when I look at the stack VIP, who do I see? But another Joe. Yeah. Now, new listeners, when I'm referring to another Joe here, this is not the real Joe Cruz. The real Joe Cruz is the producer of the show. Another Joe is a pretty regular caller who likes to ride the merry-go-round and the Ferris wheel so much that sometimes he rides that Ferris wheel 3 times in one day. Right, another Joe?
Oh, Bob, I hope I don't get in trouble.
I'll give you a pass, another Joe.
Okay, so you're talking about one second here, I'm looking at it. 10 GCA, what was it, 10 GCA title what?
10 GCA Chapter 19.
Oh, man. I'm sorry, Uncle Bob. My phone's acting up. What did you say?
I said 10 GCA Chapter 19.
Okay. And so these were bills that were some of them amended by Shelton or Eddie Cabo?
One was submitted by Barnes and the Silly Six. The other one was submitted by Shelton and 4 more.
So Shelton, are either of those, you're talking about Shelton would be an older version or more recent?
They were introduced at about the same time on March 5th, both Barnes and Shelton.
Was this something addressed and passed back when Governor Calvo was Senator Eddie Calvo?
Would what have been addressed, another Joe?
The issue of the emergency powers for the governor?
I don't think so. I don't remember it.
Oh, because I think I heard it. Mouth was he might have they might have addressed this issue during one of the typhoons, possibly one of the worst, more serious typhoons. So your prescription or your your equation for a good government, effective government, is a narrow.
What I want to see, another Joe, is an efficient, effective government operating within the rule of law that provides basic government services on at least a break-even basis.
Okay, and with regards to these unusual times with emergencies and like pandemic, you want preferably there's a narrow focus, so government stays out of the way of the people, so to speak, so the people can carry on life as normal as possible. Would that seem about?
Yeah. Well, my own approach to basic government services would be the medical and safety provisions of what the governor's trying to do would clearly be basic government services. If for instance there's a flood, you want somebody to shut the floodgates. But some of the economic stuff is not basic government services, and it's clearly not on a break-even basis.
Yeah, and also it's good to I hope that they don't rush this, Uncle Bob. I hope that they get feedback, input from the Tall Nation. Right, there's time for the Tall Nation to get their voice heard, and that they come up with the best possible bill and the best possible law, so that we can look at the end result and say, wow, that was a job well done.
Well, what they might consider is amending their standing rules to read, "No bill shall pass this legislature unless it's been discussed on at least 2 episodes of Tall Tales."
that would definitely require some input.
That would definitely improve the quality of the bills that come out of that place. But sometimes it's hard to deal with folks who don't know what they don't know.
I think what's happening is there's a lot of fear in these leaders to both show that they can do the job, the task in front of them, and also to get a sense that they're satisfying their constituents. The first rule, I guess, in theory, of anyone elected into office is to get reelected, in theory, unless their plan was to only serve that one term. So, you can imagine that they want to accomplish something to put to their name. And I also, there's so much pressure with the media. I don't think this is partisan here on Guam as it is stateside. But if you look at all the criticism of the president stateside, you're like, man, it doesn't matter if he turns left, they're going to criticize him. If he turns right, they're going to criticize him. And they're mostly focusing on, I guess they say what sells in the news is mostly negative stuff. It isn't usual to report the good stuff, and there's a lot of good stuff that Trump made some good decisions when when he was, strict in January, when others were criticizing him, with China, that is, and the things that they're accomplishing now, with some of the governors, it's actually come out that they're saying that they're working well with the president.
Well, a lot of people in the mainland are troubled with this malady.
The call dropped, sir.
Oh, okay. I lost another Joe. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, another Joe. I've got a couple other callers, but I'll come back to you in the rotation. Okay. Let's see. I've got Marvin on line 2. Good afternoon, Marvin.
Hey, how are you doing?
Good.
I wanted to make a comment on what's essential. You were commenting, and just to expound on, like, your batteries. Well, if you don't get power, for example, you lose power for whatever reason, suddenly batteries become essential. I noticed that Shop for Less is now shuttered up. Now, they have a lot of stuff, obviously, that isn't essential, but they also have detergent and soaps that we're supposed to be using, and cleaners and sponges and all kinds of stuff like that. And what happens to say, oh, you got all these canned goods stocked up, but your can opener breaks. Suddenly you need a freaking can opener because you can't get your food. Okay, so, what if, say, you can't pay your power bill because you don't have a job now, and, your power gets cut off here. And then suddenly barbecue, suddenly charcoal becomes essential. Or what if your shoes tear out? You only have one pair of shoes, and you need to buy a pair of shoes. That's suddenly essential.
I'll tell you what, Marvin.
Say what's essential.
Marvin.
They're making the governor into a dictator.
Marvin, I'm on the haircut threshold. Now I know a haircut is not essential, but part of my appeal to my international radio listening audience is my handsome good looks. I don't want to spoil it all because I don't have a haircut.
Well, can I give you another example? Okay, they're shutting down. How about if you have a water pipe burst in your house, which is very, happens, and you suddenly have a flood? Suddenly parts to fix the pipes are essential. What if your toilet breaks? You no longer have a toilet anymore. Or your shower, you can't take a shower. It's like these are all basic health needs. So it's where they draw the line, decide this is essential and this is not essential, and it's just every day they seem to get more and more draconian in their stuff, and it's just, this whole thing about $5,000 and putting people in jail for a year, that's one step away from Russia or communist China, where you don't put you in jail. Well, they may, but they also may ghost you. At least they're not talking about taking somebody out and shooting them if you do something wrong for buying some batteries. It's just, when you think about it, it's just hilarious.
And Marvin, that's why I read this piece of the Lou's remarks to the Medical Society when she said, basically, you have no say.
Right. Well, even work. It's like there are people. Not everybody works for the government of Guam is getting a check. People are they're going to run out of money. That's essential. They got to be able to buy food. It's like if people are able to still work, and it's real hard right now, and they shouldn't be stopping them from working as long as they can. You can do it safely, do it reasonably. We all do the best we can. You do social distances, you wash your hands, you do all these things, but they are the cure is way worse than the disease. The ramifications of what's happening in the world right now is going to kill tens of millions of people. They're putting the world into a depression. All the people on the borderline countries and stuff that already don't have enough food to eat, they're going to be starving, and then there's going to be rampant other diseases and everything else going like crazy, and depression and drug overdoses, and it's crazy. It's just people aren't thinking, and it's all hype and panic. They've allowed panic.
The only good thing I can see about it all, Marvin, is this: that younger folks will be well armed to have with stories that they could tell their grandchildren.
Yeah, the only good thing I can say to be positive, like we've been through a lot. I've been around for quite a few decades and been through some stuff like most of us, like all of us actually. This too shall pass.
It shall indeed.
This too shall pass.
Yeah.
But I'm just waiting for it's starting to fray around the edges where the more reasonable, average, calm thinking people, not the people in the bubble, not the people in government or in media, are starting to speak up and go, hey, I need, I really do need a job. I really do need to work. I got a family to feed, Sure. I got a rent to pay, or I got a house I'm going to lose, I really do need to work, honestly. So this is essential. So anyway, okay. Well, I said my piece. Basically, the bottom line is, the start of it is there's a lot of those things that when they roped off Kmart and stuff and everything, I was just laughing. I'm thinking, laughing and sad at the same thing, thinking, who's to say what's essential? If you suddenly run out of underwear, that's essential.
And of course, the answer to that question is so simple. The executive order ought to say that that whatever is determined to be essential on tall tales is the rule. That's what the rule ought to be, Marvin.
Virtually anything is essential when you get down to it. I mean, clothing, food, clothing, and that's food and clothing. That used to be essential, and things like that. So there's very few frivolous things. I mean, it's silly. People aren't, in these times when people are scared and they ain't got jobs, they aren't buying frivolous stuff. What they're buying is generally essential. They're not running around blowing a bunch of money on crap they don't need.
True enough,
seriously,
Marvin.
think about it.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, short break, and then I've got Jimmy, and then who's after Jimmy, Real Joe Cruz?
Frenchie. Ha ha ha.
Okay, so try not to sing between now and the time that Frenchie sang.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Wow, nice smile. So perfect and all.
Thanks. I owe it all to Dr. Robert Yang and his Smile team. They do wonders for a healthy, happy mouth.
Got teeth? Don't wait until they hurt. Schedule your routine checkup and cleaning with Dr. Yang and his Smile team. Suite 119 in the East West Business Center, Upper Tumon. Call 647-8702 or 3.
The best thing that happened to teeth since toothpaste.
Dr. Yang and his Smile team.
They make smiles happen.
One of the easiest ways to prevent the spread of COVID-19 is to wash your hands with soap and water for at least 20 seconds. Let this message help you time it. Start soaping up now. If you're sick or caring for someone who is, wear a surgical mask or N95 respirator when you're around others. If you're not sick, wear a washable cloth face covering in case you're an asymptomatic carrier. Don't touch the front of the mask and always remove it from the back. When you cough or sneeze, use a tissue or your upper sleeve, not your hands. Choice Broadcasting reminds you to stay safe and stay clean. You can rinse now.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
So here we are, once again, the deserted grandstand at Churchill Downs, the racetrack that hasn't seen a horse for 3 weeks. The starting gate, which is beginning to get a little bit rusty because it hasn't opened for so long. We'll endure, and we're going to talk for a minute with the legendary Jimmy. Good afternoon, Jimmy.
Hi, Bob. It's just wonderful to talk to you on this woeful Romanian Wednesday afternoon. And I will be quick because I'd rather hear Frenchy talk than say my little bit. But full disclosure, I don't have $5,000 to give GovGuam. Further full disclosure, this is one of the Tina Munoz Barnes's idea to charge me $5,000 and put me in jail for a year for driving to buy some groceries is one of the most fat-headed, stupid ideas I have ever heard. And I'm sure Fritzy can say that better than me. So I'll leave you alone. Bye-bye.
Sometimes I wish Frenchie wouldn't, I wish Jimmy wouldn't beat around the bush quite so much and just come right out and tell us what he thinks, right? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay, and let's see. We got about 10 minutes here. We got Frenchie on the line. Here's Frenchie. Good afternoon, Frenchie.
Good afternoon, Bob. Thank you, Real Joe, for the drum roll. Anyway, we're getting dramatic. Last night I was watching what was happening on the mainland and looking at which state was doing what in regards to amendment, Constitution amendment protections. And then I was comparing it to what we were doing here on Guam, and lo and behold, all the people that are in power that are trying to reduce the liberties of their own citizens are all Democrats. What a big surprise. And here, of course, we have the Che Bevacqua that is advising Marsh Taitano, and so they are pushing those leftist agenda left and right. Curfew. Usually a curfew is when you have a breakdown in society. I don't see any breakdown in society around Guam. I see a few stupid people that belong to the Adelup that go and meet for poker after a funeral, but besides that, most people are following the law. There was a few teenagers that didn't at the beginning of the curfew, but that's about it. I don't see huge civil disobedience. I don't see riots and people trying to pilfer stores. We are not there yet. So what is this curfew needed for? Plus, on top of it, most of the stores that do the Mamamco's hours is between 5 and 6 a.m. So they are not going to be able to go shop unless they go with everybody else waiting in line for hours. I mean, the stupidity of these people, besides their hunger for power, because that's all what it is. It's hunger for power to push agendas that are not going to be able to be changed while they are in place. They are trying to find excuses to push things that people don't want. And it's true in Virginia with the blackface governor basically locking down the whole state. You had the sheriff of Los Angeles County that wanted to stop gun stores from working, which was he had so much pushback, and that's amazing in California. He had pushback on it so much that he had to pedal back. But you have all those states, Illinois, Michigan, New Jersey, New York, trying to take away the liberties of their own citizens under the pretense of an emergency. And so far, nothing is really needed to be reducing our liberties. But that's exactly what they're trying to do. And then in the back, you have all the far-left politicians that keep on bringing things like new registration for voter laws and all those things that have nothing to do with the pandemic. So, that was my observation for today. And really, those silly six, like you call them, I think it's going to stick to them, need to pay for it at the ballot box in November. They are totally inept. They don't understand the U.S. Constitution. They don't understand the organic law. I mean, those people are just amazing, and they are supposed to be leaders. They are a joke. So that's all what I had to say. I will leave you the last 5 minutes so you can close with fireworks.
It's always a pleasure talking to you, Frenchie. Thank you very much for calling today, and I'll see if I can find my fireworks.
Yeah, I'm sure, but Joe must have some in his toolbox.
So long as he's not singing and making it rain.
So far, the weather has been holding pretty good, so we'll see. We'll keep on. It's a Holy Week, so we have to keep on hoping,
Right. Okay, Frenchie.
Bye-bye, Bob. You have a nice evening.
You too. Yeah, so the thing to think about here is this, and I've hammered on this so many times. Does emergency create power? Are we willing to give public officials more power in the face of an emergency than we would give them under ordinary circumstances? And if emergency creates power, then aren't those who figure, if I want more power, what I must do is create an emergency? So if emergency creates power, they're running the risk that power will create that emergency. And as Frenchie said, this seems to be as epidemic as the Wuhan virus, this willingness to usurp the kind of power that is contrary to the liberty of the citizens. So I got about 5 more minutes to go here. I'm going to see what Jack can add to the program. Jack?
Hi. Good evening there, Bob. I got to say some at least nice things about what the governor did during our press briefing yesterday. Is that at least she and her staff had the decent courtesy to wear a mask before they stole our liberties. But I wanted to just comment on, I've noticed that when it comes to assistance and aid, it seems that us in the private sector need to fill out like 5 times more paperwork to get assistance as opposed to a government employee here in Guam. It seems like whenever they need something, it's through the legislature, and automatically it just appears in their paycheck. Not even a discussion. But when it's us in the private side, what is it? We have to fill out PPP forms. We have to fill out Lord knows what. I filled out my PPP. I'm a gig employee, so I had to fill out my PPP forms, and just waiting around, not relying on it, because my motto is and always is, if you're waiting for the government to bail you out, it's already too late. So you do the preparedness as well as you can. You can't, you foresee what the best that you can, and you prepare yourself for the best that you can, and that's what I've been doing since January. I'm going to run out a little short, but just taking it day by day.
Well, good,
doing
Jack.
as much as I can.
Good.
Yep.
So you finished today's gig, is that it, Jack?
Yeah, well, actually my gig was done about maybe 4 weeks ago, but just this past week, 2 weeks ago, I got caught in and I was kind of busy, so that's how it is, when you're self-employed and you're doing your own work and stuff like that. But there's a lot of people that are worse off than me, and so I just pray for them. And it is Holy Week, and today's supposed to be Christmas Mass, but we know how that's going. So,
Sure.
Best wishes to everybody out there. Stay safe, stay calm, and we'll get through this together.
You're always welcome on Tall Tales, Jack. Thanks for calling.
Take care, Bob.
Okay, that was Jack, the guy who has called me up in the past and told me that I didn't know Jack.
Yes, sir.
And a couple of times he was right. Hurts.
Sort of.
Yeah, it kind of hurts, That's the way it goes. So I'm just peeking at Facebook here for towards the end of the show here. And here's a post. Those masks were a joke that Jack referenced. Those masks were a joke. Lillian kept touching her face. That defeats the purpose. There are no other governors wearing masks while giving a press conference. Looked silly. And I agree. I could be wandering in here wearing a mask for effect when I'm talking on the microphone. But other than my own silly routine about when I have a cold and I sneeze here near the microphone and I tell you, stay away from the speaker on your phone because I don't want you to catch my cold, the risk that anybody is exposed to because I'm not wearing a mask when I'm talking on this microphone doesn't exist. Okay, so we'll come back tomorrow. Unfortunately, is the last day of the week for Tall Tales. I don't like it, but the real Joe Cruz and I will make it somehow. We'll see you then.